The first lie Daniel told that night was about the tie. "I changed because the blue one looked too formal," he said, adjusting the silver-gray silk knot in the hallway mirror. Evelyn watched him from the staircase landing. The blue tie was still hanging in his closet, untouched, pressed flat. She knew because she had seen it there 20 minutes earlier while looking for her gloves. She said nothing. That was how their marriage had survived 12 years. By respecting the architecture of omission. The gala at the Halstead Modern Art Pavilion began at 7:30. By 8:15, Daniel was already in the center of a semicircle of investors, one hand around a crystal glass, voice low and measured, wearing the expression he reserved for rooms that converted charm into capital. Evelyn stood near a sculpture made of suspended steel rings and watched him from across the room. There was precision in the way Daniel occupied space. He never scanned a room nervously. Never checked his phone twice. Never perspired under pressure. He had built his reputation on calm surfaces. That was why the woman approaching Evelyn stood out immediately. She was tall, dark-haired. Her silver dress reflected the gallery light in fragments like broken glass catching moonlight. She carried no drink, no handbag, no visible hesitation. She stopped beside Evelyn without introducing herself. "Your husband was in Manhattan on March 12th, she said softly. Evelyn turned her head but did not step back. "Yes," she replied. "Board meeting." The woman's mouth curved into something too restrained to be called a smile. "No. Suite 1408. Mercer Langford Hotel. With me." Silence settled between them with surgical precision. The orchestra in the next hall continued playing. Someone laughed too loudly near the auction podium. The woman extended a folded receipt. Evelyn took it. Hotel letterhead. 2 guests. Champagne service at 1:12 a.m. Charged to Carter Dynamics corporate account. Daniel Carter's signature at the bottom. The handwriting was unmistakable. Clean, narrow, controlled. "My name is Vivian Hale," the woman said. "My husband is Marcus Hale." Evelyn knew the name. Marcus was Daniel's corporate attorney. He had been in their house twice for dinner. Vivian leaned closer, her perfume faint and cold. "Your husband slept with me," she whispered. "And your husband is helping mine steal from you." Evelyn looked again at the receipt. Not the accusation. The timestamp. 1:12 a.m. At 1:09 that same night, Daniel had texted her from the board dinner. "Miss you, long night, don't wait up." The precision of the lie was what hurt. Not the betrayal itself. The calibration. Across the room, Daniel raised his glass slightly in Evelyn's direction, smiling, as though nothing in the architecture had shifted. Vivian followed her gaze. "He thinks timing protects him," she said. "Men like that confuse delay with immunity. Why are you telling me this now? Because yesterday I found the transfer documents." Evelyn looked up. Vivian reached into a slim metallic clutch she seemed not to have been carrying before and removed a second folded page. This one was printed email metadata. Header timestamps. Deleted correspondence restored from archive. At the bottom of the chain was an attachment label. Equity reallocation. Draft Carter spousal. Exclusion revision.pdf. Evelyn did not unfold the rest. Her fingers tightened around the paper, but her face remained still. In the center hall, applause broke out as Daniel stepped onto the low stage beside the CEO. Vivian's voice dropped another degree colder. "He moved shares into a protected trust 6 weeks ago, before filing disclosure, before your signature would be required. That's illegal." "Yes," Vivian said. "That's why Marcus deleted the emails." Daniel began speaking into the microphone. His voice carried across the gallery in warm, polished tones. Integrity, transparency, and long-term trust. Evelyn stared at him. For the first time in 12 years, she saw not her husband, but the mechanism underneath him. A man who believed that if every gesture remained elegant enough, consequences would arrive too late to matter. When Evelyn asked quietly, Vivian looked at her expression unreadable. When do we destroy him?" Vivian's eyes sharpened. Not surprise. Recognition. "In 2 weeks," she said. "At the anniversary dinner. In public." Daniel finished his speech to applause. He stepped down from the platform, smiling, already turning toward Evelyn, already preparing whatever affectionate expression he would wear when he kissed her cheek, in front of donors and cameras. Evelyn folded the receipt once, then again. When Daniel reached her, he touched the small of her back. "You all right?" he asked. She met his eyes and gave him the same calm smile. he had perfected over years. Perfectly, she said, and in that instant, the marriage did not break. It simply became evidence. Daniel came home at 11:17 p.m. Not 11:15 as his calendar had indicated, not midnight as his text at 9:42 had suggested. Exactly 11:17. Evelyn noted it without looking up from the sofa. She was in the den with a book open on her lap and a lamp turned low beside her. The page had not changed in 40 minutes. She had learned over the last 48 hours that observation required stillness, more than movement. Men like Daniel noticed interruption. They rarely noticed patience. He loosened his cufflinks in the hallway. Still awake, his voice carried the right amount of warmth, not too much. Enough to sound natural. Evelyn looked at him over the rim of her glasses. I couldn't sleep. Daniel leaned down and kissed her forehead. His skin smelled faintly of bergamot cologne, layered over hotel soap, the kind Mercer Langford stocked in guest suites. A detail too small for coincidence. She closed the book. How was Denver? A pause. Fractional, barely measurable, productive, Denver. The city printed on the calendar block he had manually inserted that morning, after deleting the original entry marked only as MH Private, Marcus Hale. Daniel disappeared upstairs. Water ran in the shower 7 minutes later. Evelyn remained seated until she heard the bathroom door close. Then she rose across the kitchen and unlocked the drawer where Daniel kept the duplicate charger for his work phone. Empty. He had started carrying both chargers. That too was new. By Thursday, Evelyn had built a spreadsheet. Not because she enjoyed precision, but because Daniel did. Patterns were easier to see in his own language. She logged departure times, return times, mileage changes on the Mercedes expense notifications routed through their shared Amex summary account, and every modification made to the family digital calendar. The alterations became visible almost immediately. 3 deleted lunch meetings in 7 days. 2 overlapping flight reservations billed and then refunded. Repeated Thursday night absences labeled as compliance review dinners, though Carter Dynamics compliance chief was in Zurich all week, according to the company newsletter. Daniel had become careless in the way confident men often do, not through recklessness but repetition. He believed consistency made him invisible, it made him legible. On Friday morning, Evelyn tested the perimeter. At breakfast, she placed a printed invitation beside his coffee cup. The annual Carter Foundation anniversary dinner. 2 weeks away. Daniel glanced at it while scanning emails on his phone. Already, he said. Yes. He nodded once, distracted. We'll need to sit with the Langfords this year. Marcus requested it. Evelyn buttered toast in silence. Marcus requested it. Interesting. That meant Marcus still believed proximity created cover. Or worse, Marcus did not yet know Vivian had already crossed the line into betrayal. Daniel lifted his coffee and checked his watch. I may be late tonight. Compliance again. He looked at her then. Just briefly. A quiet calibration behind the eyes. Yes, she smiled. Of course. He left 3 minutes later, at 8:12 a.m. Evelyn called Vivian from a number Daniel would not recognize. He's moving faster, she said when Vivian answered. No, Vivian replied. He only thinks he is. What about Marcus? A silence. Then, Marcus believes deleted files disappear. Evelyn walked to the kitchen window and watched the gardener trimming hedges along the north fence line. Across the lawn, everything appeared symmetrical. Perfect hedges, clean glass, ordered stone. Structures always looked strongest before collapse. That night, Daniel did not come home until after 1. At 12:26 a.m., Evelyn received a fraud alert text from their shared credit account. Mercer Langford, Hotel Chicago, branch authorization, pending, not Manhattan this time. Chicago, suite service $184. She did not react immediately. Instead, she waited 6 minutes, then opened the account portal from her laptop and downloaded the transaction metadata. Room number included in merchant note 1412. When Daniel entered the house at 1:08 a.m., she was asleep in bed, or appeared to be. He undressed quietly, placed his phone face down on the nightstand. Then, believing her unconscious, he carried the phone into the bathroom before showering. He had never done that before. The sound of the lock clicking into place behind him was almost delicate. Evelyn opened her eyes in darkness. There it was, not proof of infidelity, proof of behavioral adaptation, which meant pressure was reaching him. For the first time, Daniel was changing routines, not to maintain deception, but to defend it. He was no longer managing a lie. He was reacting to its instability, and reaction was the first visible sign of losing control. The next morning, Evelyn entered his home office after he left for work. Nothing had been disturbed. Desk aligned, fountain pen parallel to legal pad, laptop docked. But in the wastebasket beneath the desk, she found something Daniel had overlooked. A torn strip from a printed calendar page. Only the lower corner remained. Enough to show one rescheduled entry. March 28th, Bov. H. Confirmed Mercer, 8:30, VH, Vivian Hale. Evelyn stood motionless for several seconds, the paper between two fingers. Not because the affair shocked her now. Because the geometry had changed. Vivian had not merely been involved. She had been scheduled, integrated, planned like any other executive appointment. Evelyn placed the fragment into an envelope, sealed it, and wrote one word across the front. Pattern. Then she locked it inside the drawer beside the hotel receipt. Outside, the morning sun struck the lake glass and filled the room with pale silver light. In the brightness, Daniel's office looked immaculate, but now she could see the fractures. Tiny, precise, spreading beneath the surface, and Daniel, still smiling in boardrooms and polished elevators, had not yet understood the most dangerous truth in his collapsing design. He was no longer the one collecting information. Vivian never came to Evelyn's house. That was the first rule she imposed after the gala. No private residences. No repeated meeting locations. No calls longer than 3 minutes. No digital trail that could be reconstructed into intent. So on Monday afternoon, they met in the underground parking level, beneath a closed luxury retail arcade on Wabash Avenue. Inside Vivian's black Range Rover, engine running, heater low. Rain struck the windshield in fine diagonal lines. Vivian handed over a gray envelope without greeting. Marcus archived everything in a shadow server, she said. He assumed deleting from the primary exchange was enough. Evelyn took the envelope but did not open it immediately. How did you get access? Vivian adjusted her gloves with slow precision. My husband uses one password for every private system. A pause. He thinks consistency is efficiency. Evelyn almost smiled. Daniel had the same philosophy. That was the weakness in men who believed control was a permanent condition. They repeated themselves. She unfolded the packet. Inside were printed copies of internal email chains between Marcus Hale and Daniel Carter, each page marked with restored metadata, recovery timestamps, and server path references. The first 2 pages confirmed what Evelyn already knew. Hotel reimbursements hidden under legal consultation categories, travel bookings routed through subsidiary expense accounts, messages stripped of intimacy and reduced to logistics, room secured, use Mercer corporate code. Vivian confirmed Thursday. Evelyn believes Denver story. Cold, administrative, efficient, adultery translated into operational language. Then she reached page 6. And the room changed. Attached to a message time-stamped 12 days earlier was the document Vivian had mentioned at the gala. Equity reallocation draft, final spousal exclusion.pdf. Evelyn unfolded the attachment copy slowly. The paper was warm from the car heater vents. It took her less than 20 seconds to understand what she was looking at. Daniel had initiated a pre-IPO restructuring transfer of $8.4 million in restricted stock options into a newly formed Delaware trust. Trust beneficiary, Carter Strategic Holdings LLC, managing proxy, Marcus Hale. Spousal notification clause, waived under emergency executive exemption pending final board approval. And beneath that, in Marcus's notation field, Evelyn's signature not required if filed before marital asset disclosure trigger. For several seconds, Evelyn said nothing. Outside, a car passed through the garage ramp, tires hissing over wet concrete. This isn't concealment, she said at last. No, Vivian replied. It's extraction. Evelyn looked again at Daniel's digital signature at the bottom of the transfer request. Sharp, clean, undisturbed, not forged, not coerced, planned. The affair had been camouflage. The real betrayal was financial annihilation. Daniel had not merely intended to leave her deceived. He intended to leave her legally erased. Marcus Hale lost control at 3:17 that same afternoon. Vivian knew because she still had mirrored forwarding access to his private backup mailbox. She showed Evelyn the live screen on a secured tablet. Inbox, subject line, alert. Archive integrity breach detected. Marcus had logged into the recovery server remotely from his office downtown and triggered an emergency deletion sweep. Too late. Vivian had already cloned the archive onto an encrypted external drive 3 nights earlier. On screen, Marcus began sending increasingly erratic internal messages. Who accessed Node 4B lock external permissions now? Call Daniel immediately. Do not email further. The wording deteriorated with each message. No punctuation, no polished legal cadence. The syntax of panic had begun. Evelyn watched silently. Does Daniel know yet? She asked. Vivian shook her head. Marcus is still deciding whether to confess the breach or hide it. Which will he choose? Vivian powered off the tablet. He'll hide it. Men like Marcus never reveal damage until concealment becomes impossible. That evening, Daniel returned home early. 6:30. An anomaly. He entered through the kitchen instead of the front hall and removed his coat himself instead of handing it to staff. His movements were composed but too deliberate. Measured calm, the kind that appears only after receiving destabilizing information one cannot yet verify. Evelyn was at the dining table reviewing architectural sketches for a lake house renovation she had no intention of approving. Daniel poured himself mineral water. No dinner meeting, she asked. Cancelled. Marcus. Daniel looked up. Only for a fraction. But there it was. A microscopic tightening at the jaw hinge. Why, Marcus? She folded one page neatly and placed it aside. You've mentioned him more than usual lately. Daniel drank before answering. He's under pressure with the IPO filings. Evelyn nodded once. And are you? The silence after that question lasted 2 beats too long. Daniel set the glass down. Should I be? The counter-question was elegant, deflective, controlled, but imperfect. Because Daniel for the first time was no longer speaking from certainty. He was probing for exposure. Evelyn rose and crossed to him, placing one hand lightly against his shoulder. A gesture intimate enough to disarm. If something is wrong, she said quietly, I assume you'll tell me. Daniel covered her hand with his. Warm skin, steady pulse, and a lie already forming behind his eyes. Of course. At 11:48 p.m., after Daniel fell asleep, Evelyn entered the study and removed the sealed envelope marked pattern. She added a second envelope beside it. This one she labeled critical detail. Inside she placed copy of the trust transfer filing, Marcus's recovery breach alerts, email metadata proving premeditated concealment. Then she opened her laptop and began cross-referencing Delaware trust registration databases. At 12:14 a.m., she found the final fracture point. Carter Strategic Holdings, LLC, had been incorporated not 12 days ago, but 4 months earlier. Before Daniel's first false Denver trip. Before the Manhattan Hotel. Before the affair had even begun. Which meant the chronology she had believed was wrong. The adultery was never the catalyst. It was the distraction mechanism. Daniel had not betrayed his marriage because he lost control. He had betrayed it because he was preparing theft. And in the cold blue light of the study, Evelyn understood the true shape of the war now unfolding. She had not caught her husband in an affair. She had intercepted an exit strategy. On Tuesday morning, Daniel brought her coffee in bed, not because he was affectionate, because he was recalibrating. Evelyn knew the difference immediately. The tray was arranged with unusual precision. Porcelain cup aligned with saucer handle facing right, 2 slices of toast, untouched, folded copy of the financial section placed beneath the napkin. Daniel only performed gestures like this when he sensed imbalance he could not yet define. Ritual was his preferred method of restoring control. If he could make the surface look intact, he believed the structure beneath might obey. You were working late, he said, setting the tray across her lap. I couldn't sleep. He gave her a sympathetic half-smile, the same one he used at funerals and shareholder disputes. Too much stress. Evelyn looked into her coffee. The steam rose between them like a veil. Yes, she said. Probably. Daniel lingered for another moment, studying her face with quiet calculation, not suspicion, assessment. He was testing whether Marcus's silence meant safety. He still did not know what had been taken from the archive. He still did not know whether Vivian had moved against him. And because Daniel lacked facts, he had returned to the oldest refuge available to him. Domestic normalcy. A husband bringing coffee, a wife in bed, morning light across linen sheets. An illusion curated as carefully as fraud. By evening, the house resumed its choreography. Dinner at 7:30. candles lit by staff at 7:20. Bordeaux decanted before Daniel entered the dining room. The salmon was overcooked. Evelyn noticed, because she noticed everything now. Daniel spoke through the meal in measured fragments about market volatility, board nerves, and a pending regulatory call with New York Council. His tone was casual, but the cadence was wrong, slightly over-explained, too polished. He was filling silence before it could become dangerous. Evelyn responded where required. A nod, a question, a brief acknowledgement, nothing excessive, nothing revealing. Across from her, Daniel cut his food into exact portions and never once checked his phone. That detail mattered most. Normally during pre-IPO weeks, his phone remained face up beside his plate like a second pulse. Tonight it stayed in his jacket pocket, concealed, protected. The silence between them thickened, but not visibly. To anyone watching, they would have appeared composed, wealthy, mature, synchronized. A successful American marriage sustained by routine and expensive tableware. Only Evelyn could feel the internal fracture spreading beneath her ribs. Every ordinary gesture now required force. Passing bread, pouring wine, asking whether he wanted more asparagus. She performed each one as though moving through ice water, not because she feared Daniel, because she was beginning to understand the scale of what he had intended. 4 months. 4 months of legal architecture built in secret while still sleeping beside her. The betrayal no longer felt like anger. It felt geological, layered pressure accumulating beneath calm terrain. At 8:11 p.m., Daniel finally broke the pattern. "Have you spoken to Vivian Hale recently?" The question landed between dessert plates. Evelyn lifted her spoon, but did not eat. "No. Marcus says she's been distracted." There it was. Indirect reconnaissance. Daniel could not ask what he really wanted. "Did Vivian tell you anything?" So he used Marcus as proxy. Evelyn placed her spoon down carefully. "I didn't realize Marcus discussed his marriage with you." Daniel reached for his wine. "Not directly." "Then why ask?" For the first time that evening, Daniel hesitated. A pause so slight another person might miss it. But Evelyn had trained herself to read microfractures. Because he said voice even, she seemed strange at the gala. Evelyn held his gaze. "She told me your speech was excellent." That was not what Vivian had said. Daniel knew it. And because he knew it, the lie functioned as signal. "I know more than I am showing." His eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly, then softened again into practiced warmth. That's kind of her. Neither of them touched dessert after that. At 10, they sat together in the living room. A fire burned low in the marble hearth. Daniel reviewed briefing notes on his tablet, while Evelyn pretended to read. The room glowed amber with curated comfort. Cashmere throws antique brass lamps, the quiet hum of hidden climate control. A magazine photograph of stability. At 10:37, Daniel's phone vibrated once on the side table. He looked at the screen, did not pick it up, but Evelyn saw the sender name before it dimmed. M.A.U. Daniel let the call die unanswered. Then he stood. "I'm exhausted," he said. "Of course." He kissed her temple before going upstairs. The gesture was gentle enough to seem sincere. When his footsteps disappeared above, Evelyn remained motionless in her chair for another 6 minutes. Then she crossed the room, picked up his abandoned tablet, and entered the passcode she had memorized 11 years earlier. Still unchanged, their wedding anniversary, consistency is efficiency. Inside his calendar, tomorrow's schedule showed a blank block from 2 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. No label, no meeting title. But beneath the hidden metadata line, visible only in expanded sinklos, was the deleted original entry. Mercer Marcus, final signature review. Final signature. Evelyn felt something inside her chest tighten sharply. Not surprise, not grief, something colder, because now she understood the timing. Daniel was still moving assets, even after detecting instability. Even after Marcus's breach alert. He believed the machine could still be completed. He believed he could finish dismantling her before she struck. At midnight in the bathroom mirror, Evelyn examined her own face under white vanity light. Perfectly composed, no redness in the eyes, no tremor in the mouth. Externally, she remained intact. Internally, the fracture had widened into something dangerous. For the first time since Vivian approached her at the gala, Evelyn felt the urge not to calculate but to destroy immediately. To confront him. To place the trust documents on the kitchen marble. To watch his face fail in real time. Her fingers gripped the sink edge until her knuckles whitened. Then she released it. No. Immediate anger was what Daniel expected from injured people. Emotion would restore his advantage. Silence was stronger. Silence forced him to operate blind. And blindness in men, addicted to control, produced error. Evelyn turned off the light and stood in darkness for several seconds. Upstairs, Daniel slept, believing the house had returned to rhythm, believing dinner had neutralized danger, believing routine had sealed the cracks. He did not understand that the calmness surrounding him was no longer peace. It was staging, and every ordinary evening, from now until the anniversary dinner, would be part of the performance. A marriage still standing, a wife still compliant, a table still set, while beneath it, the collapse continued to build in silence. The email was drafted at 4:12 a.m. Evelyn wrote it in the library, barefoot, on cold walnut floors, wearing the silk robe Daniel had given her for their 10th anniversary, a gift purchased, she now remembered, during the same quarter he had opened Carter Strategic Holdings. The house was silent, except for the low, mechanical hum of the refrigerator compressor cycling through the kitchen wall. She sat at the antique writing desk facing the east window and composed the message in plain language. No accusations, no adjectives, no emotional leakage, just evidence. Subject line: confidential disclosure, pre-IPO fraudulent asset concealment and fiduciary misconduct. Daniel Carter, attached. Restored email archive between Daniel Carter and Marcus Hale. Delaware, Trust Incorporation records, equity transfer draft, excluding spousal disclosure. Expense reports linked to concealed hotel reimbursements. Metadata logs proving deletion attempts after breach alert recipient lists. All 7 Carter Dynamics board members. Lead underwriting investors in New York and Boston. External Regulatory Counsel. 1 investigative financial journalist at the Wall Street Ledger. At the bottom of the email, she added a single sentence. This release is time-stamped and programmed for simultaneous distribution at 8:43 p.m. April 28th, during Carter Dynamics' anniversary dinner event. She stared at that final line for a long time. Then, she encrypted the file set, authenticated the delay trigger through a third-party timed server in Geneva, and entered the release authorization code Vivian had secured through an offshore legal proxy. The screen displayed. Schedule confirmed, April 28th, 8:43 p.m. Point of execution irreversible unless cancelled, with dual key override. Vivian possessed 1 key, Evelyn possessed the other. Neither intended to revoke it. That was the moment the future closed behind her. Not when she learned of the affair. Not when she saw the trust documents. Not even when she understood Daniel meant to erase her financially. This was the true threshold, the moment revenge ceased being possibility and became architecture. Daniel woke at 6:55. By 7:20 he was downstairs in shirt sleeves reviewing market briefs at the breakfast counter, as if nothing in the structure of his life had shifted. He looked rested. That irritated her more than it should have. There's a governance call at noon, he said, not looking up. Marcus thinks the final transfer review can be completed today. Evelyn poured cream into her coffee. Final transfer. Daniel froze for less than a second, then resumed scrolling. Asset realignment for post-IPO shielding. He said it too easily, not because he believed she understood the phrase, because he believed she would not ask. Evelyn stirred her coffee once. Sounds complicated. It's routine. Routine. The word nearly made her laugh. Daniel had built an entire criminal deception inside that word. He kissed her cheek before leaving. His mouth was warm, his hand steady. Even now he thought he was managing timing. Even now he believed he remained ahead of consequence. At noon, Evelyn met Vivian in a botanical conservatory cafe, north of the city, surrounded by orchids and filtered glass light. Vivian arrived without makeup, hair tied back, carrying a leather folio case. She removed her gloves and said only, "Marcus is panicking. How bad he tried to suspend the filing review this morning." Daniel overruled him. Evelyn nodded. That tracked. Marcus had seen enough of the archive breach to understand exposure risk. Daniel, by contrast, still believed aggression could outrun collapse. What if Marcus tells him everything? Evelyn asked. Vivian opened the folio and slid over a printed screenshot. A text message chain between Marcus and Daniel from 9:08 a.m. Marcus, we need delay. There are inconsistencies in the archive logs. Daniel. Then bury them. We proceed today. Evelyn read it twice, then placed it back on the table. He still thinks this is recoverable. Vivian's expression hardened into something close to contempt. That is why he will lose. At 2:17 p.m., Daniel entered the Mercer Langford downtown through the private garage entrance. Evelyn knew because Vivian had already arranged access to the valet timestamp records. Room 1412 again. Same sweet family as Manhattan, same executive floor. But this meeting was not romantic. Marcus arrived 7 minutes later. Their conversation captured only in fragments through hallway directional audio from hotel security Vivian had bribed was enough. Board signatures already queued. If Evelyn finds timing discrepancy, she won't. You said that about archive breach. Daniel's voice remained calm longer than Marcus's. But by the end of the recording, Daniel's tone had changed, sharper, compressed, no longer persuasive, reactive. He was beginning to feel pressure without yet understanding its source. The most dangerous phase for men like him, awareness without clarity. That evening, Daniel returned home carrying white lilies. An absurd gesture. Evelyn accepted them with gratitude, so measured it bordered on elegance. What are these for? She asked. He loosened his tie. No reason, there was always a reason. Flowers were Daniel's preferred instrument when uncertainty entered his perimeter, not apology stabilization. At dinner, he was almost charming. He asked about her day, remembered details from an old trip to Napa, suggested they take a vacation after the IPO launch. Future language. Another tell. People constructing lies often overinvest in future tense, as if describing tomorrow can erase what is already collapsing underneath today. At one point, he even laughed, a polished, easy sound, and yet throughout the meal, he touched neither wine nor dessert. His appetite for control had consumed both. At 9:26 p.m. after Daniel fell asleep, Evelyn entered his office one final time. The filing packet lay sealed on his desk. Tomorrow Marcus would submit it. If completed, the transfer would move beyond reversible litigation threshold. She stood over the envelope without touching it. She could still stop this in simpler ways. Confront him. Call the board herself tonight. Destroy the documents physically, but those options belong to people seeking justice. Evelyn was no longer seeking justice. Justice would let Daniel negotiate, explain, contain damage. What she had scheduled for April the 28th allowed no containment, only detonation. She took a photograph of the sealed filing packet and sent it to Vivian with one line. He's proceeding, no cancellation. Vivian's reply came 40 seconds later. Then, neither are we. At 11:58 p.m., Evelyn logged once more into the Geneva release server. Status unchanged. Timed distribution active. Dual key cancellation required. She entered her override credentials not to cancel, but to confirm lock permanence. The system prompted. Warning, after final lock release cannot be revoked without legal intervention. Continue. Evelyn pressed yes. The screen paused. Then, final lock confirmed. She closed the laptop slowly. In the darkness of the study window, her reflections stared back at her, still controlled, unreadable. Upstairs, Daniel slept in the center of their bed, one arm across the empty half where she would not return tonight. He was already losing everything. His company, his name, his marriage, his illusion of mastery, and he did not yet know the clock had started. At 8:43 p.m. on April 28th, the machinery he built to erase her would reverse direction. And from this point forward, there would be no path left back into silence. The anniversary dinner began at 7 p.m. in the Grand Atrium Ballroom of the Langford Crescent Hotel. Daniel had chosen the venue himself 6 months earlier. He liked rooms designed to imply permanence. The ballroom ceiling rose 3 stories in glass and iron latticework suspended above white marble columns and mirrored walls that multiplied every chandelier into endless repetitions of light. 82 guests filled the room. Board members, institutional investors, legal counsel, media partners, and selected spouses, arranged with deliberate precision around 12 circular tables. At the center of the ballroom stood a raised platform with a podium engraved in silver. Carter Dynamics. 10 years of vision. Daniel believed symbols mattered. That was why Evelyn had agreed this room was perfect, because destruction properly staged required symmetry. At 7:12 p.m. Evelyn entered, wearing black silk, not morning black, Controlled black, the kind worn by women who intend to remain visible in photographs long after the men beside them have disappeared from headlines. Daniel met her near the ballroom entrance and kissed her cheek for the benefit of cameras. "You look extraordinary," he said. His voice was smooth, his tuxedo immaculate. He had regained the confidence she had expected. The filing transfer had gone through that afternoon. Marcus had submitted the final legal packet at 3:46 p.m. Daniel now believed the danger had passed. The trust was sealed. The assets moved. The spousal exclusion window closed. He thought he had survived the narrowest corridor. That certainty softened him. It made him radiant. And radiance, Evelyn had learned, was often the last expression worn before collapse. Across the ballroom, Vivian arrived alone at 7:19. Silver gown, diamond earrings, no wedding ring. Marcus saw her immediately from table 4 and nearly dropped his champagne glass. His face did not betray panic to outsiders, but Evelyn watched the involuntary details. The rigid shoulders, the unfinished sip, the hand tightening too long around Crystal's stemware. Marcus had not expected Vivian to appear, which meant he had not yet understood the full extent of her betrayal. Good. Uncertainty would slow his reactions. Vivian did not approach him. Instead, she crossed the room and sat beside a private equity director from Boston, as though she belonged exactly where she had chosen to place herself. She never looked at Marcus again. That more than accusation destabilized him. Silence from a known enemy creates panic faster than confrontation. At 7:41 p.m., the first course was served. Sea bass over saffron risotto. Daniel moved from table to table with polished confidence, touching shoulders, shaking hands, offering tailored remarks to each investor. Marcus remained near the stage, reviewing his phone every 40 seconds. At 7:53, he received Vivian's final message. "Do not call me again. Watch the clock." He looked up sharply across the ballroom. Vivian was laughing softly at something said by the Boston investor, one hand resting beside her wineglass, posture relaxed. Marcus stood so abruptly, his chair scraped marble. Daniel noticed and crossed toward him. They spoke in low voices near the west column. Evelyn could not hear words from her table, but she did not need to. Marcus's expression said enough. He was no longer managing exposure. He was bracing for impact he could not identify. Daniel listened, frowned once, then gave the dismissive gesture he used in board disputes when subordinates brought him incomplete problems. Dismissal, still confidence, still blindness. At 8:07, the ballroom lights dimmed slightly. A spotlight rose over the stage. The CEO introduced Daniel with practiced enthusiasm. "Tonight we celebrate not only a decade of growth, but the extraordinary leadership of the man who made this IPO possible." Applause filled the atrium. Daniel ascended the stage to sustained admiration. Perfect posture, perfect smile, perfect timing. Evelyn checked the clock beneath her phone screen. 8:39 p.m. 4 minutes. Across the room, Vivian lifted her glass without drinking. A signal. Evelyn touched the inside lining of her clutch purse where her encrypted phone rested with the Geneva release server open on standby. Not because she needed to activate it. The timed release would execute regardless. But because control is sometimes psychological. To feel the mechanism near your hand even after it has become unstoppable. Daniel began his speech with warmth. He thanked investors, praised innovation, acknowledged Marcus Hale by name for unwavering legal brilliance. Marcus did not smile. Sweat had begun to gather visibly at his collar. At table 2, one board member's phone vibrated, then another, then another. The first email wave had landed. 8:43 p.m. Exactly. Evelyn felt her own phone pulse once in her hand. Distribution complete. No sound, no fanfare, no explosion. Only silence spreading through a room built for applause. Daniel was mid-sentence when he noticed the shift. Noticed eyes dropping to screens, faces changing, one investor leaning toward another in sudden whispered urgency. He paused. A tiny interruption. Barely half a second. Then resumed speaking. "And what defines trust in this company is," at table 5, the lead underwriter from New York stood up. Not dramatically. Quietly. He checked his phone again, then looked directly at Daniel on stage with an expression stripped of ceremony. At the far end of the room, the Wall Street Ledger journalist was already leaving, her seat, phone pressed to her ear. Marcus reached into his jacket for his mobile, unlocked. It saw the subject line in his inbox: confidential disclosure. Fraudulent asset concealment. and went pale enough that even Daniel could see it from the stage. The speech stopped, completely. A silence opened beneath the chandeliers, so absolute that cutlery ceased moving. Daniel stared down from the podium. "What is this?" he said, not into the microphone at first, then louder, because the microphone caught the second repetition. "What is this?" His own amplified confusion echoed through the ballroom. The investors said nothing. Board members were already opening attachments. One of them, Harriet Cole, audit chair, rose from her chair and addressed him across the room with brutal corporate clarity. "Daniel, step away from the podium." The sentence landed harder than shouting would have because authority had shifted in public, instantly, irreversibly. Marcus moved first. He crossed toward Daniel in visible panic, phone in hand, whispering harshly as he reached the stage stairs. "They have everything." Daniel seized the phone from him, scrolled once, twice. Evelyn watched the precise moment recognition entered his face. Not anger, not disbelief, recognition, the understanding that the architecture had failed from inside. His eyes lifted from the screen and found Evelyn across the ballroom. For the first time in 12 years, Daniel looked at her without any control left in his expression. There it was, the naked calculation collapsing into fear. He understood at last. Not every detail, not yet, but enough. Enough to know she had done this. Enough to know he had lost. Vivian rose from her chair. No announcement, no farewell. She walked past Marcus without touching him, past Daniel frozen beside the stage, past the investors already calling legal counsel, past the journalists moving toward exits to file first reports. At the ballroom doors, she paused only once, turning her head slightly toward Evelyn. A silent acknowledgement. The plan had crossed the threshold. Nothing remained now but ruin. Evelyn stayed seated, hands folded in her lap, face calm. Around her the ballroom dissolved into controlled chaos, phones ringing, chairs scraping, voices sharpening into accusation, and at the center of it, beneath the silver company emblem and collapsing chandeliers of reflected light, Daniel Carter stood trapped in the room he had designed for triumph, while the ordinary elegance of a corporate dinner transformed in real time into the stage of his public extinction. By 8:51 p.m. the ballroom no longer belonged to Daniel. It belonged to procedure, not outrage, not scandal, not emotion. Procedure was colder than all of them. Within 8 minutes of the disclosure release, Carter Dynamics' outside compliance counsel had sealed the executive financial portal. The lead underwriters suspended the post-IPO roadshow briefing scheduled for the next morning. 2 audit board members had withdrawn into a private conference suite with printed copies of the transfer documents already marked in red pen. The company Daniel had spent 10 years constructing had entered survival mode, and survival mode begins by amputating damaged leadership. Daniel was escorted off stage not by security, but by Harriet Cole and the firm's general counsel, Andrew Levin. That detail mattered. Security would have implied spectacle. Legal escort implied liability. He descended from the podium with the rigid posture of a man still attempting dignity after authority had already evaporated. Marcus followed 3 steps behind, speaking too quickly into his phone, voice cracking under pressure. "Do not send anything further until I review metadata chain custody." "No! Listen to me, shut down the mirror server." Andrew Levin turned sharply. "Mr. Hale, stop using your phone immediately." Marcus stopped walking. For the first time that night, he obeyed another man without argument. His legal instincts had finally caught up to the scale of exposure. Too late. At 8:57, the first media alert went live. Wall Street Ledger breaking. CFO of Carter Dynamics linked to pre-IPO asset concealment scheme. Then the second. Board investigating possible fraud, offshore trust transfer, and executive misconduct. Then the third, more dangerous than either. Source documents suggest personal relationship used to facilitate undisclosed financial moves. That last line changed everything. Fraud alone could become litigation. Fraud entwined with adultery became narrative. Narrative destroys reputations faster than courts. Phones vibrated across the ballroom in cascading waves. Guests were no longer pretending discretion. Investors were openly leaving tables. Assistants were forwarding statements. Journalists were intercepting board members near exits. The room had become a market of collapse, and Daniel, once the center of every conversation, was now excluded from all of them. In the private conference suite above the ballroom, Daniel faced the board at 9:11 p.m. No wife, no allies, no prepared remarks. Only Harriet Cole, Andrew Levin, two independent directors, and a forensic accounting consultant, dialing in remotely from New York. The trust transfer documents lay spread across the glass table between them. Daniel did not sit until told. Harriet removed her glasses and folded them carefully. "Did you authorize this Delaware transfer without disclosure to the Board Compensation Committee?" Daniel's voice when he answered was still composed. "Yes, but under emergency exemption provisions." "Full," Andrew said. He slid another page across the table. The exemption clause was improperly invoked because the trust beneficiary is linked to an undisclosed proxy controlled by outside counsel. Marcus, seated at the far end of the table, shut his eyes briefly. That movement told the room more than any confession. Harriet turned to him. "Did you draft the exclusion language knowing it concealed marital asset exposure?" Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, then finally, "Yeah." The word entered the room like a gunshot, muffled by velvet. Daniel turned toward him sharply. "You said the structure was protected." Marcus laughed once. A fractured, exhausted sound. "It was, until your wife sent it to the entire market." That was the moment Daniel lost his last illusion. Not when the board confronted him, not when the press reports broke, but when Marcus said it aloud. "Your wife." Because until then, some hidden part of Daniel had still believed this disaster might be technical, a breach, a leak, a containable legal event. Now it became personal, deliberate, engineered, and irreversible. At 9:24 p.m., federal investigators entered the building. Not armed agents, not dramatic arrests. Two representatives from the Securities and Exchange Commission and one financial crimes investigator from the U.S. Attorney's Office arriving through the hotel's executive entrance with document preservation orders already printed. The hotel staff attempted discretion. It failed instantly. By 9:28, 3 journalists had photographed the investigators crossing the lobby. The images spread online within minutes. Inside the conference suite, Daniel read the first preservation notice in silence. His hands remained steady. Only his breathing changed. Shallower now, measured in shorter intervals. The investigator addressed him directly. "Mr. Carter, you are instructed not to alter, destroy, or transfer any further corporate or personal financial records pending inquiry." Daniel looked up. "I need to speak to my attorney." "My pa." The investigator glanced once toward Marcus Hale. "Mr. Hale may also require separate counsel." Marcus lowered his eyes to the table. There it was, the final severing, professional, total. They would not defend each other now. Mutual collapse makes loyalty unaffordable. Meanwhile, below in the ballroom, the affair itself had begun surfacing in full. Someone, almost certainly the Wall Street Ledger journalist, had cross-referenced hotel billing logs, included in Evelyn's disclosure package with travel reimbursements from Carter Dynamics. By 9:31, a fourth headline appeared. Internal records show executive funds used for affair-related hotel expenses. Then came the inevitable amplification. Photographs of Daniel and Vivian entering Mercer Langford, Manhattan. Archived event photos of Marcus and Daniel at legal conferences. Screenshots of restored messages. The private betrayal became public spectacle. What had once been whispered inside marriages was now searchable, permanent, index. At 9:46, Daniel finally called Evelyn. She did not answer. She was still seated alone in the emptied ballroom. Most guests had gone. The candles had burned low. Half-cleared plates stood abandoned under dimmed chandeliers. A waiter silently removed untouched dessert trays from nearby tables. Her phone vibrated 3 times. "Daniel, Daniel, Daniel." She watched the screen without expression, then turned it face down beside her wine glass. Across the room, hotel staff were dismantling the stage backdrop. 10 years of vision. One technician removed the silver company lettering by hand, letter by letter. The symbolism would have seemed theatrical if it had not been so exact. At 10:03 p.m., Carter Dynamics issued its emergency statement. Daniel Carter suspended pending full investigation. Marcus Hale removed as external counsel, effective immediately. Apuo stabilization process frozen. Independent forensic audit initiated. By October 11th, Daniel's corporate access badges were disabled. By October 14th, Marcus's law firm website removed his partner profile. By October 20th, Daniel's photograph vanished from the Carter Dynamics executive leadership page. Digital erasure began before midnight. Faster than shame, faster than grief, institutions protect themselves first, always. At 10:27, Daniel emerged alone from the conference suite. His tie was gone, his collar open. No escort now, no board members beside him. He crossed the nearly empty ballroom and stopped when he saw Evelyn still seated under the fading chandelier light. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Daniel said in a voice stripped of polish, "How long have you known?" Evelyn looked at him calmly. "Long enough." His face tightened, not in rage, but in something rarer for him. Humiliation without defense. He glanced around the ruined room, the dismantled stage, the emptied tables. "They've destroyed everything." Evelyn met his eyes. "No," she said quietly. "You did." And because there was nothing left for him to deny, Daniel Carter, who had once controlled markets, narratives, and every silence inside their marriage, stood in plain sight, with nowhere left to move, while the world he built collapsed around him in full public view. 3 weeks later, the house on Lakeshore Drive was legally hers. Not because Daniel had surrendered it willingly, because the court-appointed financial freeze had exposed enough concealed transfers to invalidate every protective shield he had built around Carter Strategic Holdings. The Delaware Trust was dismantled under emergency injunction. The hidden stock allocations were reclassified as marital assets, pending fraud adjudication. Daniel's executive compensation package was suspended indefinitely, and the deferred share grants, those same shares he had tried to move beyond on Evelyn's reach, were reassigned into escrow under her civil claim. In the language of the settlement order, it was called equitable preservation. In reality, it was reversal. The machinery Daniel designed to erase her had folded back and preserved her instead. Daniel was living in a furnished rental apartment in Evanston by then. Short-term lease. Corporate discount withdrawn. No driver, no assistant. His accounts had not been emptied, but they had been narrowed into supervised channels controlled by legal review. Every expenditure above $5,000 required disclosure. His passport had been flagged pending securities investigation. 3 civil suits had already been filed by investors alleging fiduciary deception. The criminal inquiry had not yet reached indictment. But it would. Everyone in Chicago finance understood that delay was procedural, not merciful. His reputation had collapsed faster than his case file. He was no longer invited to industry panels, no longer copied on board correspondence, no longer greeted warmly in restaurants where he had once entered through private entrances. The city had not forgotten him. It had simply reclassified him. From power to cautionary tale. At 9 o'clock each morning, Evelyn sat in the glass breakfast room overlooking the lake and reviewed legal updates with forensic accountants. She had dismissed 2 publicists, declined every media request, and refused all invitations to comment on the scandal. Silence, she understood now, was stronger after victory than after injury. The press wanted emotion. They wanted tears, vindication. Statement pieces about betrayal and resilience. She gave them nothing. Without her participation, the scandal belonged entirely to Daniel. That was deliberate. She would not become part of the narrative that ruined him. She would remain the uncooperative absence at its center. Vivian Hale left the city on a Thursday morning without announcement. No farewell lunch, no dramatic goodbye. She sent only one final message at 6:14 a.m. Marcus signed separation papers. "My transfer is complete. Do not contact me again." Attached was a scanned copy of the signed marital dissolution filing and one final legal attachment. Marcus Hale's resignation agreement from his law firm partnership. He had lost his equity stake, his client portfolio, and most devastating of all, to a man like Marcus, his professional credibility. The Illinois Bar Association had opened disciplinary review proceedings based on the falsified disclosure clauses. He would likely never practice corporate securities law again. Evelyn read the message once, then deleted it. Not from anger, from completion. Vivian had entered her life like a blade and exited with equal precision. Some alliances exist only to end destruction properly. Nothing meaningful survives them except results. Daniel called exactly twice after the court freeze order. The first time, Evelyn let it ring unanswered. The second time, she answered. It was raining that evening. The sound came through the windows in thin silver lines against the lake. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then, "They're recommending felony filing." His voice sounded older, not weaker, emptier. Evelyn stood by the window, one hand resting lightly on the glass. "I assumed they would." A long silence followed. Then, Daniel asked the only question left to men after collapse has stripped away strategy. Was any of it real? She closed her eyes briefly, not because the question hurt, because it was the first honest thing he had asked in months. Yes, she said. That answer seemed to strike him harder than the accusation would have. He inhaled sharply. When did you stop loving me? Evelyn looked out toward the Black Lake water. The answer arrived with perfect clarity. When you began planning my absence before creating your escape. Daniel said nothing after that. At last the line disconnected. No goodbye. No apology. There are endings too damaged for ceremony. In early June, Carter Dynamics completed its internal restructuring. Daniel's name was removed from all historical investor materials. His severance package was voided for cause. The board approved permanent executive disqualification. The IPO resumed 6 months later under new leadership, successful, oversubscribed, profitable. The company survived by amputating him completely. That, more than legal punishment, marked his true extinction. The institution learned to prosper without remembering him. On the first warm evening of summer, Evelyn hosted no celebration, no guests, no champagne. She sat alone on the rear terrace as twilight settled over the lake and reviewed the final property transfer documents. House title: solely vested in Evelyn Carter. Escrow shares: released. Civil recovery claim: closed. The pages were clean, orderly, final. Inside, the staff moved quietly through familiar routines. The dining room was set for one. In the master bedroom upstairs, Daniel's side of the closet remained empty except for a single cedar hanger left behind after the removal team cleared his suits. Evelyn had never asked for it to be taken away, not as sentiment, as evidence. A void properly framed is still part of architecture. Later that night, she walked through the silent house, turning off lights room by room: study, hallway, kitchen, gallery, stairs. At the end, she paused in Daniel's former office. The desk had been replaced, the filing cabinets removed, the wastebasket, the one where she had found the torn calendar fragment marked VH, confirmed Mercer, 8:30, was gone. No trace remained of the mechanisms that once operated there. Only the window stayed unchanged. Beyond it, the city lights shimmered in fractured lines across dark water. She stood there for a long time in silence. Not grieving, not triumphant, simply still. Daniel had lost everything measurable: his career, his status, his marriage, his future in the world he valued. Marcus had lost his profession. Vivian had vanished by choice. The scandal had consumed itself and passed into archive. And Evelyn remained. The house, the shares, the name, the silence. In the end, she had not won happiness. Happiness was never the prize in wars like this. What she won was rarer. She was the only one left in control. And in the quiet after ruin, that was enough.